Hello again, and welcome to another episode of Leading from Alignment with our good friend, coach, mentor / tormentor, John Opalewski. Good morning, John. How are you?
Hey, Jim. It's good. Good to be with you this morning.
Good. And we have a guest today. Would you like to introduce our guest?
Yes, we do. We have a very special guest with us today. Pastor Chris Brooks, the lead pastor at Woodside Bible Church, is our special guest today. I've known Chris, I would say probably about 1.5 2 years, and just been impressed with his leadership, his just who he is as a person, and gotten to know him a little bit better over the last 1.5 years, and thought it would be such a blessing to those who are listening to this podcast to hear from Chris today. So Chris, thank you. Welcome to the podcast.
Well, John and Jim, it's great to be with you guys. I appreciate the work that you're doing to help to strengthen leaders, in particular, those who are helping to lead in the church.
And well, Chris, the first thing we like to do is kind of just get to know people. I'm sure, and you're well known to many, but unknown to others. And because the podcast is in Montana and all sorts of distant, far-flung lands, tell us about yourself as far as like your conversion and your call to ministry, especially. I think that's something we can all connect to. How'd you meet Jesus, and how did Jesus communicate to you that you're going to be serving him in this way?
Well, I'm a third-generation preacher, so I got it honest. My grandfather was a preacher, and my father, I remember growing up with my dad. He was more of an itinerant, and I remember him taking me and my siblings to various churches and conferences as he preached the gospel. He was much more of a fire and brimstone type of guy, and never looked to be re-invited back. His thing was let me preach with boldness, and these are one-time invitations. But he was super passionate about the gospel, so much so he passed away in 2001. But I remember towards the tail end of his life, he was dealing with various illnesses and was pretty weak. But when he would start talking about the word, he would sit up erect. He would walk the floor, pace the floor, give me one of those personal sermons. And then after he finished preaching the word, he would sit down and kind of lose his energy again. There was a grace that was on his life for that. And in the midst of all of that, just fell in love with the word myself around 13. So I kind of grew up, guys. I never remember a time where I was hostile to the gospel, but I certainly remember a time where it became my personal decision to follow Jesus. And it was at the age of 13. God blessed me to be at a great church that was preaching and proclaiming the gospel. And at about 13 years old, I remember we were on a Walt Disney trip. And my brother and I were sleeping on a pull-out couch after a day at Disney World. And the gospel just all came together for me. So I got on the side of that pull-out couch bed to bow my head to pray. And my older brother said, "What are you doing?" And I shared the gospel with him. So he's technically my first convert. He knelt with me, and we accepted Jesus that night.
Wow. I love it. And then the call to ministry. You're 13 years old, and all of a sudden the light comes on. But there's a lot of time between 13 years old and actually being prepared for ministry. Tell us about that.
Yeah, along the way, like most of us, I had men of God who saw things in me before I saw them in myself, and gave opportunities to, speaking youth days and participate in ministry. But I think it was when I got to Michigan State University, when I got to college, that I really had to come to grips with, what is your calling? What is my calling in life? It's around that time where most young adults are thinking about career and where do I want to end up? And for me, it was pretty clear I wanted to end up somehow preaching God's word. And it started with a little Bible study at Michigan State University. It was literally me and another buddy. He was the only Christian I knew. And we did a Bible study one week where it was the two of us, but we left his dorm room open. That was about as bold as we were at that time. Just leave the door open. Well, the next week, about 5 people joined us. The following week, it was up to 11. After about a month, there were about 90 people meeting in the lobby of that dormitory having a Bible study. And I think, that God's grace was kind of confirmed there. And I left Michigan State and decided to go to seminary at Biola University, and grateful there. Along the way, also studied at what's now Moody Theological Seminary in Michigan. At the time, it was Michigan Theological Seminary. So grateful for the journey.
That's amazing. I was in the military, so that I'm the only believer that I know in the dorm, in the barracks. I guess the difference is I never opened the door, so I'm grateful for your boldness.
We were probably too afraid to talk to people, actually witness to people out of fear of rejection. But we said, If we leave our door open, let's see what God might do.
So, Chris, you said something as you were sharing your story that there were people who saw things in you before you did, and I think that being a leader, there's a lot of that involved in being a leader, that God has given us a responsibility almost to see potential, to see greatness in others and call that out of them. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, I like to think of it this way, John, that, we're all given the opportunity to loan somebody our faith in them until they're able to see God's grace at work in their lives. And, I remember a youth pastor of mine dropping me off from youth ministry one night. We had a youth meeting, and he drops me off. My parents are at the door, and he says to my mom and dad, your son has a real call on his life. I really believe God is going to use him. And, I didn't see any of that stuff in myself, but I think back to hearing his words, and man, that matched with the hunger that was growing in me. It just, he in many ways, he lent me his faith in me while I was still growing and being able to see God's grace in my life, And so we see it all throughout Scripture, and I'm grateful that I've had men who are like Paul with me and Timothy.
Yeah. And I think Jim would say the same thing, and I'll say the same thing, that there were people who early on saw something in me that actually surprised me, that like they saw leadership in me. They saw the ability to teach that I didn't know I possessed. And I'm so grateful for those older folks, they weren't that much older than me, but that called that out of me. So thank you for that. I appreciate your perspective on that, Chris.
It's funny because, you've got school teachers, if language is your gift, you're not allowed to use it in school. So all the other authoritative figures said, stop talking. But then like I say, some youth pastors say, hey, would you talk? You're like, that the call out of you, which you've been trying to suppress because it got you spanked when you got home, with that note.
It's so funny you bring that up, because that's the story of my life. They used to give those conduct scores. So, you get your grade and then 1 to 5 on behavior, right? 1 being good and 5 being bad. And I was one of those kids, got good grades, but it was all 5s on the other side. And when my mom went to parent-teacher conference, and mom or dad, it was always, he talks too much in class. Who knew that was my calling? I wish I would have known then. I could have told him, hey,
I had the privilege. I had the privilege of running into my junior high school vice principal 30 years later, and led his son to the Lord and future daughter-in-law, and they had a couple of kids. And so the wedding rehearsal night, in walks what used to be a 7-foot tall man. Now he's 5'4". I had no idea. He was 7 feet tall when I was a kid. He's 5'4", and I recognized him. And all those years later, he said, "Do I know you?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And I used to say, "Sir," when I was in trouble in his office. He said, "Do I know you?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Wiegand." I said, "Yes." He said, what are you doing here? I said, I'm the pastor. He said, "No, seriously, what are you doing here?"
Awesome.
He recognized the gift. He just didn't know it didn't fit into the mold. It didn't fit into the pattern.
We have to mature into our gifts. I mean, all of us, whatever the gift is, you have to grow and mature into it.
Yeah.
So, Chris, what was it like to take on the lead pastor role at Woodside? You've been there about 1.5 years now as the lead pastor, I think. Is that correct? Yeah,
well, actually, coming up Christmas Eve would be my 2-year anniversary of the first official worship service that I came in. But yeah, as the lead pastor, it was May 2019. In many ways, John, this year has felt like a mulligan So I don't know if this is a year that adds on to my seniority or not. It kind of feels like the lost year. But in many ways, I could not be more grateful for the church family here. You know, one of the special things about Woodside, they're known for their love for the Bible. They're known for their love for keeping lighthouses open and caring for churches and pastors. But what I was blessed by is the spirit of welcome and hospitality here. You guys know, bringing your family to a new ministry is not without its own risk. My biggest concern coming was not, was it the right decision for me pastorally, but would it be the right decision for my wife and my children? And what has been awesome is how we've been befriended, the love and the support that we've received. Ministry is hard, even on the good days, but what makes it enjoyable is when you're really leading a group of people who are passionate about the right things, Jesus and loving one another well.
Did you feel like, Captain Kirk just retired and I'm taking the Enterprise? Did that have that sort of, like, was it intimidating to come in? Sometimes when you come behind someone who's had a long tenure and a measure of success, you're kind of the guy after the guy, and you feel like you're a substitute teacher or a stepdad for a season. Did they all have a plan for that, or did you ever feel that?
Well, what's interesting about my ministry story, Jim, is that this is the second time that I took over for a long tenured pastor. And the first church that I pastored, the pastor had been there for 36 years. Right. And I took over and was able to pastor there for 20 years and was grateful for that. So coming here, it wasn't a new experience for me to step into the role that a great leader had filled. But you're exactly right. I mean, it is certainly daunting. Even with the best support, there are days where you say, Lord, can I measure up to the task? I like to think of it this way, guys. It's like if Doug Schmidt, who is my predecessor, was in the weight room, bench pressing 500 pounds, he kind of built up to that. Started at 150 pounds, put on some plates, maybe got up to 200, but then you come in to the weight room and they just pass that 500-pound weight over to you and say, hey, now start lifting this. Yeah. You certainly need some spotters so you can grow into it. And, again, I've been blessed to be surrounded by a strong team that really has made up for my weaknesses and given me the opportunity to grow into the role.
I followed somebody that planted the church 33 years prior to me arriving, and he was 72 and I was 29.
There you go.
Huge differences. Yeah. And I remember I had been here 10 years and I was talking to somebody at the bank. They said, oh, you're the new pastor at the church. I said, 10 years later, I'm still the new pastor at the church. I don't know when this changes, but
that's right.
Yeah. Huh. So you came to Woodside with a fresh set of eyes, and I think that's something. Yes. There's an advantage to raising up sons and then turning it over to them, but there's also an advantage to someone who comes with a fresh set of eyes and just looks at assets and liabilities and resources and reputations and make some decisions. What was that like to come into Woodside with that fresh set of eyes, and what did you see?
Yeah, well, I think a couple of things come to mind. Number one is the fact that you need to have your ecclesiology pretty clear, your view or theology on the church. And, I see the church, Jim, as a family. Yeah. And I start from that premise that my job is to get to know the church family, to see what God is doing here, not to come in with some big aggressive agenda that is disconnected from the unique kind of move of God among his people here at Woodside. So the first thing I wanted to do is just get to chance to see the world through their eyes, and hopefully they can see the world through my eyes as well, and kind of see what God is doing. I would say the second thing is, I'm the type of guy who, before you tear down a fence, you need to find out who built it first and why was it built. I don't think you just come in and just start tearing fences down because there may be a very good reason why that fence was built. And even if you don't agree with it, you need to respect why it's there as you try to change things. But one of the first things that I did, guys, is I wanted to visit as many members as possible in their homes. And as I did that, what I discovered is that just about every member has some section of their home or some place on their walls where they have murals to their children and grandchildren. You know, the place, and we all have it in our houses, where we have pictures of the kids and the grandkids, and they mean so much to us. And as I would ask for prayer requests, what do you want me to be praying for? Inevitably, it led back to that. And so it was pretty clear for me that part of the reason why God sent me here is to make sure that Woodside was a church that not only reached the present generation, but where people could see their children and grandchildren and that generation coming to Christ. And so that's been part of my message and my driving passion.
Yeah, that makes change easier when there's a reason.
Yes.
Yeah.
If change is necessary, you find the greatest why to create the new what in children and grandchildren. Wisdom.
And, you know, Chris, as you were talking about your approach, it just reminded me how often when a new leader comes into a church, that temptation to want to do away with the past, to make your mark, to make a splash, so to speak, and so often I see a creation of unnecessary turbulence. Yeah, could have been avoided. And so I just wanted to push up on that, because I feel like I was 29 years old when I became a lead pastor, which I think is awful young to do that. And I felt this need to make a splash and make my mark early. And I created problems for myself that I could have totally avoided had I been patient and did what you did. Just get to know people. So I wanted to reinforce that thought, Chris.
Well, you know, change is hard whenever you do it. So even for those who are patient, it certainly is not easy, but you're exactly right. I think part of what I am sympathetic for the 29-year-old guys like you two were, and you know, I was young too when I started pastoring, is that there is an innate pressure that comes from the people you lead. I think people are wired to, and I can't tell you how many people, even here at Woodside, the first meeting I'm with them, the question they ask is, so what's your vision? And there's an inherent pressure in that question that I have to think of something that is, you know, innovative and groundbreaking. And sometimes you feel ashamed to say, well, my vision is to get to know you. You know, to find out where the bathrooms are located, you know, just to get a chance to be a part of the church family. But I will say this, that one of the thoughts that I've adopted over the years is that leaders often underestimate what they can do in a decade and overestimate what they can do in a year.
Good word.
You know, we think that, you know, man, if I could just nail this next year, we're going to set the world on fire. When really, if it's a 10-year kind of runway, you can pace yourself. And what I hope is that for our church, that the next decade is one that honors God and many people come to know Christ.
Right on. I love that. Well, our time is evaporating on us. It's funny how quickly a good conversation makes time fly. But we are so grateful. There's so many nuggets in the last 15, 20 minutes that are just your wisdom is redemptive, and we're grateful for that. And John, I know that this season is being we're in this new year. There's things happening. This is encouraging, but sometimes people need a little bit more than just encouragement. Sometimes they need direction, affirmation, ministry, help. If someone was listening today and said, "That's great for Chris, but I'm in the middle of a transition from hell. I'm lost. I'm stuck. I'm thinking about change," and they wanted to talk to somebody about how would they get a hold of you?
Best way to do that is just go to our website, convergecoach.com, and click on the contact us link, and that will start a conversation with us. Chris, I was wondering if you would hang around for another episode with us. We have more questions that we'd like to get to with you, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Great.
All right, well, Jim, we'll wrap us up, Jim.
Yeah, until next week. We're praying for you. God bless you. We're here for you. The body of Christ is growing, and it needs strong, healthy leaders. So however we can assist you in your journey towards that, count us in. God bless you. And we are on your team as you continue to lead from alignment.